Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Beis, Daf 82 of Masechta Pesachim, and Daf 82. I think we can almost kind of sum it up in one thing, which is like burning kodshim that became Tamay. I mean, specifically, of course, we're interested in korban pesach that became Tamay, but we're going to be talking about essentially burning kodshim that becomes tamei in different ways. Let us just jump right in. We're going to start on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis. I feel like 1 second. Alright, sorry, I think that's a little better. We're going to start on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis by the Mishnah. About, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom. It says the Mishnah, Nit Mashalim Arubo. I think that's what we got up to, right? Yeah, we did this. Yeah, exactly. Fine. Says the Mishnah, Nit Mashalim Arubo. Sorfanof also lifnei abira me'atza ma'iracha. Nit mamiyuto v'anosar. Sorfanosu b'chatzusein o agagusein me'atzei atzmon. Hatzukan and sorfan also lifnei abira b'shvil leonos me'atza ma'iracha. Interesting. So what's this talking about? So the way I understand it is it's talking about a korban pesach, but we're not talking about a korban pesach that became tamei in the Beis Hamikdash. I think that the next Mishnah is really going to talk about that, I think. Maybe, arguably. But I think that this is talking about, basically, you brought your korban pesach home. We're already out of the Beis Hamikdash. We had all the descriptions about how you shech the korban pesach in the Beis Hamikdash, and there's dam, and the kohanim, and the gold, and the silver, and 12 million people, all that stuff. I think at this point, everyone's taking their korban pesach at home. And then a nudnik comes over, he's a zav, and he touches your korban pesach, and it's really annoying. Now what do you do? So nit mashalim or rubo. So if at the point that it became tamei, it was whole, it was a whole korban, or rubo, or maybe you had started, maybe you already roasted it and you were dividing it up, and it was still mostly whole, and the majority of it became tamei. So in that case, sorfin also lifnei abir me'atzeh ma'aracha. So then you bring it back to the Beis Hamikdash, and they would have a place there where they would burn psulei hakodesh. And you would go to that place, and that's where you would burn your korban pesach that became tamei either entirely or in a majority kind of way. Nitmamiuto. Now, what if a little bit? I don't know. You had already cut it up into portions for each person, and then one portion got tamei. So ve'anosar, as well as nosar. Of course, we know that you have to eat the korban pesach before, well, it's taka machlekes, right? Machlokes or Belazar ben Azariah Bakiva, daf Tesav Masech the Brachas. We also saw it, I think we just referenced briefly a few days ago. Anyways, you can't leave it over, either Belazar ben Azariah, I think, says till midnight, or Bakiva says till the morning, maybe the other way around. But there's a time frame to eat it, and by the next day, certainly, whatever you didn't eat, you're going to have to burn. Okay, so let's say only a little bit of the korban pesach, or whatever is left over, whether it's tamei or not. So if an also b'chatzusein, or gagosein me'atzei atzmon. So take out your own wood, and you can burn it in your chatzer, on your roof, whatever. Just make a fire and burn it. Hatzikan and sorfin also lifnei abira b'shvil leonos me'atzeh ma'iracha. The stingy people, the people who don't want to waste use their own wood to burn the noser, or this minority of the korban that became tamei. So they bring the meat to the Beis Hamikdash, and they burn it where they're burning the psulei kodshim, and they chaparain and use the wood from the Beis Hamikdash. That way, they don't have to use their own wood. All right. My time, says the Gemara. How come when the entire korban pesach, or the majority of the korban pesach, becomes tamei, you bring it, you schlep it out to the Beis Hamikdash and burn it dartin? Why can't you burn it in your own house? So, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina kedei levaishin. So Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina says, well, because we want to embarrass them. They were careless. They weren't careful enough to make sure that the korban, right? We're talking about people that their entire korban pesach, or a bulk of it, a majority of it, became tamei. So Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina wants to say, well, these people were being careless, and because they were being careless, we want to embarrass them. They're going to be schlepping their whole korban nebuch It's like what's it called? The walk of shame. They're schlepping the whole korban pesach to go burn it by the Beis Hamikdash because it entirely became tamei. All right, fine. Nitma miyuto v'chulei. So we say that if a minority of the korban became tamei, so then you just burn it at your house. You burn it in your chatzah, on your roof. V'aminu, but we have a kasha. V'chein mishiyatzim Yerushalayim. If you have a fellow who is in Yerushalayim and he's heading home, v'nizkar sheish biyado b'sar kodesh, and he remembers, I have b'sar kodesh on me. Dag nabbit, right? He has a little bit of let's say he was there, he was eating a korban shlamim, maybe he had something to be thankful for, he brought a korban toda, and so he had this some meat on him, and he didn't realize, and he left Yerushalayim. Now, even if it's a shlamim or a toda, it's kachim kalim, which means you have to eat it in Jerusalem. Once he leaves Jerusalem, it's possible b'yotze. It's possible now because it left Jerusalem. So you have to burn it. So what do you do? So again, you have a fellow, he left Jerusalem, and he remembers that he has some korban meat on him. So if he already, and we've seen this before, if already he's past this place that's called Sofim, that's the furthest place where you could still see the Beis Hamikdash from there. Once you pass this place, you can no longer see the Beis Hamikdash. So if he's already past Sofim Komos, then just burn it in place. But if he hasn't yet passed Sofim, so what does he do? So it says, go and burn it in the Beis Hamikdash where they burn the Psulei Kodshim. So here we have a situation where he has a little bit of meat, and we're saying that he should burn it by the Beis Hamikdash. So meaning in our Mishnah, we said that you could burn it in your house. You don't have to burn it in the Beis Hamikdash. And yet over here, we're telling him that he should go back and dafka burn it by the Beis Hamikdash. So which one is it? So Rav Chaim bar Ukva, lo kasha, kan b'achsanai, kan b'bal habayis. So Rav Chaim bar Ukva gives a practical answer, which is, well, it depends. If you're a homeowner and you have a house over there, so what we're saying is you don't have to bring, if you have a little bit of meat that became tamei, a little bit of kosher meat that became tamei, you don't have to go to the Beis Hamikdash and dafka burn it there. You can burn it in your house if you want. However, this fellow, Mishayatzim Yerushalayim, he left Jerusalem and he realized that he took some meat with him. That's talking about a guest, somebody who was visiting in Jerusalem. He doesn't necessarily have his own stock of wood. So then, just go back and burn it by the Beis Hamikdash. But if you're a homeowner and you have your own wood and you're out of your own house, so then you can burn it in your own house. Rav Papa Amar, says Rav Papa, Hava be'achsanai, says Rav Papa that no, they're actually both talking about a guest. Meaning even our Mishnah where it says that you'll burn it in your chatzer or your roof, that's also talking about a guest. And it depends if he left, if he's traveling or not, if he already left. If you're a guest and you're staying at somebody's house, so then if some of the korban becomes tamei, so just burn it where you are, where you're staying. But if you already left Jerusalem, as is being described, right? So in that case, don't go back. You already left. You don't have access to wood right now. Don't go back to like the place where you were staying. Just go to the Beis Hamikdash and burn it there. But if you're staying in Jerusalem and you have, and you're staying at a particular place, so you could just burn it where you are, where you're staying. Rav Zvid Amar, so says Rav Zvid, Le'olam kidamei meikar. So Rav Zvid says no. Really, it's like Rav Chaim bar Ukva says, and he's just coming to explain Rav Chaim bar Ukva. What did Rav Chaim bar Ukva say? He said that it depends if it's the homeowner or the guest. If it's the guest, then you do it in the Beis Hamikdash. If it's the homeowner, then he does it at his house. So kan be'achsanai, kan b'bal habayis. So it's the guest versus the homeowner. Ve'afal gav lo hechzik baderech. And even though the guest hasn't left Jerusalem yet, he's still staying in Jerusalem, yet still he'll burn it in the Beis Hamikdash because achsanai came into leislei asau kitziknin. Because since the guest doesn't have wood, so we give him this. We basically give him the same solution as what the tzikanin do, as what the stingy people do, which is the Tanan, as we learn in our Mishnah at Sikonin, the stingy people surfing also the Fnei Abira, they burn even a little bit of kachim or nosar, a little bit of the korban pesach or nosar that became tamay. They would not burn it in their house, rather they would go and burn it by the Beis Hamikdash to chaparain and benefit from the wood that was already being used there. They don't have to use their own wood. So the same thing would be done if you have a guest, even if he's staying by somebody's house and he's still in Jerusalem, he hasn't left yet. Nonetheless, says Rav Zvid, explaining Rav Chaim Bar Ukva's opinion, that you would still, even though you're a guest and you're in Jerusalem, well, because you're a guest, even though you're still in Jerusalem, you would go and burn this bit of the korban pesach or the nosar by the Beis Hamikdash. Since you don't have your own wood, just go chaparain. They're burning psulei kachim there anyways. Add yours to the fire. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Bo the sarfum b'chatzoseinu me'atzem ha'aroche ein shomen loin. If he wants to burn it in his own house, okay, so there's a little bit of korban pesach, or a minority of korban pesach, a mute of korban pesach, or noser. He wants to burn it in his chatzer. However, he wants to specifically use the wood that was donated to the Beis Hamikdash to be used for the mizbeach. Yeah, to be used for the mizbeach. So he wants to chop some of that wood and schlep it over to his house and use that wood for the mizbeach in his house to burn the nosar or the minority of the korban pesach. Ein shomen loen. So then, we're not going to do that. The Fnei Abira me'atzeh atzman, and the opposite. If you want to burn this tamei meat or the nosar by the Beis Hamikdash, however, you're going to bring your own wood. Ein shomen loen. So we also don't do that either. So bishlama me'atzeh maracha b'chatzosei ein shomen loen. So says the Gemara, okay, I understand why you wouldn't use the atzeh maracha, the wood that was donated to Beis Hamikdash for the mizbeach. I understand why you wouldn't use that in your own private house, because because let's say all the meat is already burnt, the meat that you had to burn already is burnt, and now you have leftover atzeh maracha, you have leftover wood that was donated to be used for the mizbeach. So you might end up getting benefit from it in other ways. And that's no good. Right? We don't want you to, right? This is wood that was donated to Beis Hamikdash. So while maybe you can use it for the meat, that the kachim that you want to burn, but we're nervous that whatever's left over you might end up getting alternative benefits from. We don't want that. Ella, lifnei abir me'atzeh atzman my time. But what's the problem with bringing your own wood to the Beis Hamikdash and using that wood to burn the psulei kachim? So Rav Yosef Amar, Sholavayish es mi she'ein. So Rav Yosef is concerned about embarrassment. If basically it becomes the norm that anybody who's going to be burning psulei kachim by the Beis Hamikdash brings his own wood, well then, or even if it doesn't become the norm, but if you have some people bring their own wood, well then people who don't have and are unable to bring their own wood are going to be embarrassed. So Rav Yosef is concerned for embarrassment, so he says, don't bring your own wood. Rava Amar Pnei Chashad. Rava is concerned about the yentis. He's concerned about suspicion. That if you bring your own wood, or whatever doesn't get used, you might bring back with you. And the people who see that you're bringing back wood with you, they might think, why is he walking away? Why is he walking away with atzeh maracha? Why is he stealing from the Beis Hamikdash? They won't necessarily realize that, no, this is wood that he brought that's just pashat left over. So my benai, what's the nafkamina between Rava and Rav Yosef? Well, the nafkamina would be if you brought reeds or like palm somethings which you wouldn't use for the mizbeach. And therefore, so according to Rava, who's concerned about the yentis, so the yentis know halacha. When they're not busy being yentas, they're busy learning, and they know that these reeds and things wouldn't be put on the mizbeach, and therefore when you take it with you and you bring it back with you, they know, he brought those. So therefore, according to Rav, who's concerned about the yentis, he doesn't have to worry. You don't have to worry about that if you bring your own reeds and things that wouldn't go on the mizbeach anyways. However, according to Rav Yosef, you would still have to be concerned about embarrassment, right? That if you have people bringing reeds, you have other people who don't, well, it would still be embarrassing for them. So that's an nafkamina. If you bring those kinds of fuels of wood. Tanan Hasam, we learned in Masechta Tamid. Alright. Rosh Hamaimid. Oyamamid Esatmein Ashar Mizrach. The Rosh Ha'ma'amad, what are the Ma'amados? Who can tell me what the Ma'amados are? The Ma'amados, so basically, we mentioned recently the Mishmaros, right? That all of the Kohanim were divided into 24 groups, and each group would have 2 weeks a year that they would serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And then every Mishmar was divided into a Beisav, and each Beisav would have a different day of the week that they would, so you'd have a whole Mishmar that they would have a week at a time that they would serve, and then the Mishmar was divided into 6 Batei Avos, and each Beisav would serve each day. Then I think on Shabbos all of them would serve. Now, in tandem, there was something called the Ma'amados, that, in general, when a fellow brings a korban, so he would stick around and be present when it was being offered. Now, what about like the korban tamid, which is brought for all of Am Yisrael? So who's staying there with the korban? So there were these anshe ma'amados, that these people, they weren't Kohanim or Leviim, they were regular old people, I guess, and they would be present to be just to be around, so that there are sort of a representation of Am Yisrael for the communal offerings. Now, there was the Rosh HaMaimud, there was the fellow who was sort of the head of the Ma'amados, and one of his responsibilities was that if there was a Kohen who became Tamay, and therefore was unfit to do his avodah in the Beis HaMikdash on that day, so right, it's his Beisav's turn to work in the Beis HaMikdash that day, and he's Tamay. So it says that the head of the Ma'amados would take these Tamei Kohanim and stand them at the entrance to the Beis HaMikdash. The question is why? So Tanan Hasam, we learn in Masechta Tamid, Rosh HaMaimid Oyamamid Es Atmein Al Shara Mizrach, that the head of the Ma'amados would stand the Tamei Kohanim by the eastern gate to the Beis HaMikdash where everybody would enter. My time, why? So Rav Yosef K'dei Levaishon. So Rav Yosef says to embarrass them. They were irresponsible. They knew that the next day was going to be their day to work in the Beis HaMikdash. They should have been more careful and made sure not to be Tamei on this, when they had the opportunity to work in the Beis HaMikdash. So they were irresponsible, and therefore we're going to embarrass them by making them stand at the entrance to the Beis HaMikdash. Rav Amar Pnei Chashad. Rav is concerned about Yentis. What's the Yenta concern over here? The Yenta concern is that people might say, hey, where's Shmulik? Shmulik the Kohen. Why didn't, I know today is, I don't know, I'm coming to bring my korban shlomim, I'm hoping to see Shmulik the Kohen there in the Beis HaMikdash. Where is he? It must be that this wasn't a priority for him. He would prefer, he's got a lot of work to do, he can't be bothered to go to the Beis HaMikdash and do his Kohen duties, so he stayed home so that he could work instead. So we're concerned about Yentis, and they're going to think that how come this Kohen isn't working in the Beis HaMikdash today? Maybe he's doing other things that he deems more important, and but that's not true. The fact of the matter is he's here. He's just Tamei. So therefore, so that nobody should suspect that maybe the Kohen didn't show up because he's got more important things to do, we have him stand there to make it clear that no, the reason why you're not going to see him inside, it's not because he's got better things to do, it's because he's Tamei. Okay. My benayu, what's an afkamina? So you can benayu mifanke inami de kagadol shishura. Well, the nafkamina would be, what if you have a fellow who's mifanke, he's very pampered. Okay, whatever it is, he doesn't have to work. So if he doesn't have to work, so that nobody's going to think, oh, where is he? He must be that his work is a higher priority for him. He doesn't have work. So therefore, in that case, nobody's going to assume that, he's doing other things. He's got nothing else to do. Of course he's here. It must be his Tamei. Or, let's say he has a job that you can assume that he's not prioritizing that job. Let's say he makes ropes, right? As Rashi says, it's an example of a profession that isn't particularly exciting and doesn't pay particularly well. So, it's hard to imagine that this Kohen would prioritize this making of ropes profession over working in the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore in both of these cases, either because they don't have to work or because their job isn't particularly glamorous, in those cases, people would assume that, okay, he's probably not doing his job. He's probably here in the Beis HaMikdash. Why don't we see him? Mistame is Tamay. So he wouldn't have to stand at the gate. But according to Rav Yosef, who says that we want to embarrass them for not being careful, well then, that would apply no matter what. And no matter what your profession is, we would still want to embarrass you. Okay, now we get to a new Mishnah. Pesach sheyatza o shenitma yisaref miyad. Okay, so if you have a korban Pesach that was yotze, so since we're talking about a korban Pesach, so well, if it's the Emurin Mistama have to stay in the Azara, but the korban Pesach itself you're going to take home with you, so that has to stay in Yerushalayim, right? So if it leaves Jerusalem, so Oshen Nitma, or if it became Tamay, as we learned in the previous page, Yisarif Miyad. So you have to burn it immediately. Okay? We're going to talk about at what point this would apply. But at Pesach Shiatza Oshen Nitma Yisarif Miyad, Nitma Abailim, if the owners of the Korban Pesach became Tamay, Oshemesu, or they died, to Uber Tzurasu Yisarif B'Shisha Asar. So then, right, so let's say you have a Korban Pesach, and the Gemara is going to talk about at which point did these events happen, but then the owners became Tamay, or they died. So what you do is, as we've seen a few times, Ibur Tzura, you just kind of put it on the side overnight, and then the next day you would burn it. Now, as the Mishnah points out, you wouldn't burn it on the 15th, i.e. on the first day of Pesach, because you're not going to burn Psulei Kachim on Yom Tiv. That's not going to override Yom Tiv. So you can't burn it on the 14th because you need Ibur Tzura, which is basically waiting overnight. And you can't burn it then on the 15th because it's Yom Tiv, so you burn it on the 16th. Okay, fine. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer, Avzei Yisarif Miyad Lefi Shein Lo Ochlin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka's opinion is that even in this case, where the owners became Tamei or they died, you would burn the Korban Pesach immediately on the 14th, because since there's nobody to eat it, it's considered a psula begufo. It is an inherent psul, and you would burn it immediately on the 14th of Nisan. Says the Gemara. B'shlama Tamei, I understand why you would burn a Korban Pesach that becomes Tamei. Ksiv, as the pasuk says, ve'abasar asher yiga b'chol tamei lo ya'achol ba'yish yisarif. The pasuk says that if you have meat, kachim meat, that touches anything tamei, so don't eat it, you have to burn it. There you go. Kachim meat that becomes tamei, you have to burn. And as Rashi points out, as it's going to become significant in a few minutes, this is talking about shlamim, by kachim kalim. Shlamim, kachim kalim. Of course, there's different kinds of korbanos, right? Kachim kalim. Kachim are sort of more stringent. That's like a korban chatas, I think korban asham, sumin ola, right? These are things that don't leave the azar. Then you have things like shlamim, toda, korban pesach. Those are examples of kachim kalim that you can eat them anywhere inside of Jerusalem. So kachim, of course, are on a more stringent than kachim kalim. So this pasuk about burning meat of a korban that became tamei is by kachim kalim, and therefore kavachomer kachim you would burn. Okay. So again, b'shlama tamei, I understand why if the korban pesach becomes tamei, we're going to burn it. That any kachim meat that touches any tumah, don't eat it. You got to burn it. How do I know that if the korban pesach leaves Jerusalem, that you have to burn it? Well, dichsiv, as the pasuk says, this is a pasuk by the Miluim, by that was it a week? I think. I don't know. It was right at the beginning of when they put up the Mishkan. So then there was I think it was a week where the Moshe, where the Kohanim, Aaron and his children, it was like their inauguration. And in that context, it says, "Hein lohuva es dame lakodesh pnima." Right? There was a korban chatas, a chatas rosh chodesh taka, that they burnt and they didn't eat. And Moshe was trying to figure out how come they burnt this korban, how come they didn't eat it? Because korban chatas, the emurin go on the mizbeach, but the meat is generally eaten by the kohanim. And as we learned recently, kohanim ochlin uvaylim iskaprim, that the kohanim eat, and then the people will bring it. In this case, it's a communal offering for all of Am Yisrael, so they get their kapara. So Moshe was trying to figure out how come they burnt entirely this offering. How come they didn't eat it? And he's trying to figure out. He says, "Leuva es damel hakodesh pnima." It's not like you brought the blood inside of the kodesh. Now, Amar lo Moshe la'Aharon. Moshe says to Aharon, "Madua lo chaltem es hachatas." Why didn't you eat this korban chatas? Shem nichnas damel lefnai v'lefnim. Is it possible that you took from the blood of the korban into the kodesh, into the heichal? I guess the fnai v'lefnim does not even mean to the kodesh HaKodashim, but basically where it doesn't belong. So Amar lo lav. He says, no, I didn't. Amar lo shemachutz m'chitzasa yatzasa. Okay, maybe the korban went outside of the azara. Amar lo lav. B'kodesh Isa. To which Aaron says, no, it didn't go anywhere where it shouldn't have been. It remained in the azara where it belongs. Amar lo. To which Moshe says to Aharon, "Ibakodesh Isa, ve'en leuva es dama lo kodesh, leuva es dama kodesh penima." Well, if the meat remained in the azara the entire time, and the blood wasn't brought inside of the heichal, so madua lo achaltem hosa. So why'd you burn it? Why didn't you eat it? Michla, what does that imply? Tinafka inami ayol dam lefnim basefei. So what do we see? So we see that if, Moshe was trying to figure out, and he said, well, why'd you burn it? It's not like the meat went outside of the azara, implying, well, if the meat did go outside of the azara, then you would burn it. So that is how we see that korbanis are yotze, are pasul b'yotze, and you would burn it. Now, frek the Gemara. B'shloma nitma, gader achmona b'kachim kalim, v'adin b'kachim kachim. So now the Gemara asks, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that the pasuk, when it comes to if a meat of a korban becomes tamay, you burn it. So that pasuk is in the context of kachim kalim, of like a shlamim specifically. Now, if even kachim kalim, which are more lenient, you have to burn if it becomes tamay, well then certainly kachim, which are more severe, which are more stringent, you'd have to burn. Now, korban pesach is kachim kalim, so I get it. Just like by a shlamim, which is kachim kalim, if it becomes tamei, you burn it. So korban pesach will be the same thing. You're also going to burn it if it becomes tamei. Now, ela yotze, but what about yotze? This whole dialogue between Moshe and Aharon, where Moshe says, well, it's not like the meat was yotze, it's not like it left the azara. Ashkechon kachim kalim minalim. That was by a korban chatas. So sure, Moshe was saying, well, the implication from Moshe's dialogue between Moshe and Aharon was that if the meat would have left the azara, then you would burn it, but that was dafka by a korban chatas. Fine, so kachim, I understand that if it's yotze, you're going to burn it. But what about korban pesach? What about kachim kalim? How do I know that if they leave where they're not supposed to go, that you're going to burn those? Visu, and more so, you could skip the next two words. Landama, when it comes to blood that remained not thrown by the time Shkia comes, right? Meaning you have to do Zrikas Adam before Shkia. What if you didn't? Nishbach Dama, what if the blood spilled on the floor? You couldn't do Zrikas Adam Bichlal. Yatsa Dama, Chutz L'Klaim, or if the blood went outside of the azar. The Kaimelim B'Sreifa, that we hold that it's B'Sreifa, Bein Kachim Kalim, Bein Kachim Minolan. How do I know that you're going to burn those? Right? So basically all we learn out from Moshe is that if you have Yotze by Kachim, so then you're going to burn it. What about Kachim Kalim? What about all these other things? like nishbach dama, lan dama, where you burn. Where are those things learned from? So Menafka Lamidu Reb Shimon. So we learn it out from Reb Shimon. The Tanyas, we learn it about Reb Shimon Omer, says the holy Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Gidai Reb Shimon, the Smochala Shasat Chak. Although we've seen that also by Reb Elazar, but it's Reb Shimon. Miron, Lag BaOmer, Reb Shimon. Bakodesh Bayish Tisarif. So the pasuk says Bakodesh Bayish Tisarif, that, and we learned this a few months ago, that in the Kodesh you have to burn it. Limed al achatas shesreifasa b'Kodesh. It teaches us that a korban chatas, that if it becomes pasul, so then you have to burn it. Okay, you burn it in the Kodesh. In the elazobovad shabsuli kodshim b'muri kodshim kalminalan. Okay, so psulim, when it comes to korban chatas, you would burn in the azara, in the Kodesh. But what about other kodshei? What about other kodshim? Epis, I don't know, shlamim and ola. No, not shlamim, ashram. Ve'emuri kodshim kalim. Or what about even by kodshim kalim, but the emurim, at the specified parts, the parts that go on the mizbeach? How do I know that those parts you would burn bakodesh? Tamlom v'chol bakodesh ba'ish tisarif. So it says in that pasuk of Bakodesh Ba'ish Tisarif, the first word of the pasuk is v'chol. So that v'chol is going to include other things as well. So if you have so any kodshei kodshim or emuri kodshim kalim, you would burn in the azar. Okay. Ashkachan kodshei kodshim kalim minol. Great. So that works for all kodshei kodshim. Pretty good. It's a good start. What about kodshim kalim? What about the korban pesach, which is kodshim kalim? This is what we care about right now. So Ella kol psule de kodesh b'sreifa loshna kodshim kalim loshna kodshei kodshim gemara gmirila. So the Gemara says that actually, you know how we know kodshim kalim? It's confusing because it's kodshei kodshim and kodshim kalim. You have to remember which is which. So you said the kodshei or the kodshim. All right, what can I tell you? Anyways, so what does the Gemara say? You're right. The Gemara says, yeah, it's true. From the Psukim, we can only get as far as kodshei kodshim. How do we know that even kodshim kalim you're going to burn? Halacha Moshe miSinai. Let's read that again. Helakol psule de kodesh. Any psul when it comes to kodesh, bisreifer, you're going to burn. Loshna kodshim kalim, v'loshna kodshei kodshim. Doesn't matter kodshim kalim. Doesn't matter kodshei kodshim. Gemara gmirila. Staka halacha Moshe miSinai. V'chatas de Aharon. Well, then what about the dialogue between Moshe and Aharon, from which we wanted to learn out that, like, you know, if Yotzei would be a problem by korban chatas, we're saying that it's taka halacha Moshe miSinai. Mishum ma'aseh shoya kachoya. That was the dialogue that they had. The Torah was recording their dialogue, but that's lav davka how we learn out that the psulim by kodshei kodshim are going to be burnt. We know that halacha Moshe miSinai. And for what they taught by the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Bar Avua, which I think this is the third time that already it's come up in Masechta Pesachim, the Amar Afilu Pigul Ton Ibr Tzura, who says that even pigul, something mamish psula begufo, pigul's pretty psula begufo, Ton Ibr Tzura, you don't burn it immediately. You let it hang out overnight and then you burn it the next day. Minolan, how does he know this? So Mistama Yalif Oven Minosa. That he makes a Gzeir Shava. It says Avon by Pigul, and it says Avon by Noser. Just like Noser, Mimele. Well, what's Noser? Noser means it was left over to the next day. So obviously it has Ibr Tzura, because that's what Ibr Tzura is that you let it change overnight. So Mimele Noser has Ibr Tzura. So we're saying that Pigul also, you would have Ibr Tzura, you would let it hang out overnight, and then you would burn it the next day. But Frek the Gemara, B'nei Avon Michatas, De Aharon. Why don't you learn out a Gzeir Shava? It says Avon by Pigul and Avon by the Chatas of Aharon, that the implication is that you would burn it that day. Amar Chatas de Aharon ki agavna nami Ibr Tzura lidoris baya basmur asha haisa. Says Rabbi Baravua would say to you that don't bring me proofs from what happened with Aaron during the period of the Miluim. What happened there was Hora'as Sha'ah. Whatever happened there was allowed for them at the moment. But Lidoris, as he says, right, Ki Gavna, that such a case, Kilo Psul and Korban Chatas, Nabi Ibr Tsura Lidoris Barya. Lidoros, for future generations, Kilo, as a general rule that we would adapt, it would require Ibur Tsura. What happened there with Aharon, that the implication is that if there was a psul, they would burn it immediately, or no, but the Taka did burn it immediately, and Moshe was trying to figure out why, right? So how come they burnt it immediately? Because that's what they did at the time. That was a horasha. That was the halacha for them at that particular time. But in general, argues Rabbi Baravua, we would learn out Avon Minoser and say that it requires Ibur Surah. Now that we've said that all psulim, when it comes to kachim, you burn, loshna kachim kachim, loshna kachim kalim, gemara gmirela. Regardless if it's kachim kachim or kachim kalim, it's halachah l'moshe misina, you burn it. Well, then bakodesh bayish tisariv lamali. Why do I need the pasuk then of bakodesh bayish tisariv that by korban chatos you have to burn it? So the Gemara answers, well, that teaches us that where do you burn it? The Lachal Moshe Misina says that you burn it. Where do you burn it? Well, Bakodesh, Ba'ish Tisarif. Taka, burn it in the Kodesh. Okay, fact the Gemara, Kilu Nazar. V'abasa shiga b'chotame lo yachel. I think that's what it's saying. Do you burn it in the Kodesh? Or would you take it out to like where we're saying like Lifnei Abir Me'atzim Haracha, which is still in the Beis Hamikdash, but not necessarily in the Azara? Maybe that's taka what it means. Oh man, I have to look it up. Maybe like Bakodesh Kilo in the Beis Hamikdash. I have to look that up. No. One second. Rashi says Bakodesh Ba'azara in the Azara. On the last wide line of Rashi in the Azara. So then, what do they do to the Beis HaSreifa? I don't know. I'd have to look this up. Sounds like it's taka in the Azara. Well, then what kind of stuff would go? I don't know. So maybe then like things like kachim kalim that became tamay or something you'd burn. In the base of seif, as we learned, kilo if the entire korban becomes tamay. Yeah, maybe that's what it means. Okay. So then fine. No, so we said bakodesh ba'ish tisarif. How come I need it if I know that we have halachah l'moshe misina that all kachim gets burned? Well, it's telling us that the kachim taka gets burned in the azara. Fine. How come I need this pasuk that says that any meat that becomes tameh you have to burn? Why do I need it? We have halachah l'moshe misina that tells us that we have to burn it. So no. So we taka need that pasuk. How come? Because I may have thought to say psuli de kodesh. So when we say that all of these psulim, when it comes to kachim, you have to burn. So I may have thought, dama. Yeah, that applies to things like if the blood wasn't thrown before shkia sachama. V'nishbach dama, or if the blood spilled on the floor. V'yotza dama, or if the blood was taken out of the azar. V'nishchata balayla, or if it was slaughtered at night. The bisreifa, that, okay, the halacha Moshe Misina is telling us that these very kachimi kind of psuls you would burn. They are unique to kachim. There's no similar case when it comes to non-kachim, to chulin. Aval nitma, but in terms of tuma, the bechulin ami mafsil, even by chulin. Tuma is a thing even by chulin. So ema, ho v'savid bei uvdin dechol, ema lo tiba yisreifa v'tizkele b'kvura kamash malon. I may have thought though that since Tuma isn't like a uniquely kachim kind of thing, so I might think that we could just treat like regular Tuma, that just, okay, you get it out of the way, bury it, you don't have to necessarily burn it. I might think that halacha Moshe Messina about burning is for by things that are specific to kodshim. Blood spilled on the floor. What are you going to do? You can't throw the blood in the mizbeach. There's no shaset to the kohanim, or you're not going to be able to eat the meat. So burn it. Something like tumah, which applies, tumah is a thing. We've learned about tumah a million times. Well, our first real deep dive into tumah was in the 8th parak of Masechta Brachos a million years ago. So I might think that tumah you can just bury. So Kamash Malan, the pasuk says no, don't think that you have to burn kosher meat that becomes tamei. Says the Mishnah, Nitmu Abailim O Shemesu Tu B'Tzurasim Chule. The Mishnah had said that if the owners of the korban pesach became tamei or they died, so the Tanakama says that you have ibor tzura. You leave it, just kind of leave it hanging around overnight, and then since the 15th is Yom Tif, you can't burn it on Yom Tif, so you burn it on the 16th. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, no, even that you could burn immediately. If the owners become tamei or they die, so then you could burn the korban immediately on the 14th, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka. Amar Rav Yosef, machlokas shenitmu bailim achar zrika. So Rav Yosef says that the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka about whether it requires ibor tzura or whether you can burn it immediately when the owners become tamei or die. So that machlokas is only after the Zrikas Adam happened, meaning at the time of Zrikas Adam, the owners were still alive and tahor. So the Zrikas Adam, that was fine, and therefore at that point you could already eat the korban pesach. It's edible. The Zrikas Adam was done, you can eat it, and then they became tamei or they died. So since it was already ra'ui, and now the animal itself was good to go, but some other meta thing happened, so then according to Tanakama, it requires ibor tzura. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, you could still burn it. You could burn it immediately. But if the owners became tamei before the Zrikas Adam, that at the time that they became tamei, the Zrikas Adam didn't even happen yet, and the meat never even had an opportunity to be able to be eaten. So in Divrei Hakol Yisarif Miyad, everyone's going to agree, even the Tanakama is going to agree, burn it immediately. It's a psula begufo, could burn it immediately. Meisve, we have a kasha, and this is a question that we asked when we learned this about 10 days ago on daf, what daf was it? Ein Gimel Amud Beis. When we're talking about if you shech the korban pesach on Shabbos, and then it turns out that the owners were tamei, so we say the guy is potter. The guy who shechted is potter because he didn't know. If we said if it was during the week, you're going to burn it. The question is, why would you burn it? It's bebailim. It's the owners. So we're going to quote this brisa right now as well. So meisvei we have a kasha ze aklal kol shepsula begufo yisarif miyad. That if you have a psul begufo, so if there's an issue in the korban itself, so then you burn it immediately. Bedam uvebailim tu bertzuraso. But if the issue is with the blood or with the owners, well then tu bertzuraso v'yetzil v'esasreifa. Well, then you have ibor tzura, and then you burn it the next day. So katani bailim tu midadam, and we're comparing the owners to the blood, right? Saying bedam uvebailim. Madam lifnei zrika, avbailim lifnei zrika. Right? Just like the blood is obviously talking about where it became tamei before you did the Zrikas Adam. After the Zrikas Adam, it's already kind of done. So just like the blood is talking about before the Zrikas Adam, so also the owners were talking about before Zrikas Adam. And we're saying that it requires ibor tzura. So how could Rav Yosef say that everyone agrees that if the owners became tamei before the Zrikas Adam, it would be burnt immediately? This brisa seems to be saying that before Zrikas Adam, it would require ibor tzura. So rather, yidmar, if we're going to say it in the following way, machlokas shenitmu bailim lifnei zrika. The machlokas is actually when the owners became tamei before zrika. That the Tanakama is saying, like the brisa, that you would have ibor tzura, just like if the blood became tamei before zrika. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka says, even so, Well, I guess the chiddush should really be according to Tanna Kama, that even though it was before Zrika, it would still require, it wouldn't be Psula B'Gufo, it would require Zrika Sadam. Well, what? Ibur Tzura. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says, no, if it's before Zrika Sadam, it's Psula B'Gufo. And you would burn it immediately. That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka would say. That since it became right, the owners became Tamay before the Zrika Sadam, so the korban was never had a chance to be fit to be eaten, because it's only fit to be eaten after Zrika Sadam. They became Tamay before the Zrika Sadam. So the korban was never fit to be eaten. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says you could just burn it immediately. But if the owners became Tamay after Zrika, that at the time that the Zrika Sadam happened, the owners were still alive in Tahor. So there was a point when the korban was able to be eaten. So everyone, even Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, would agree that the issue is something else. It's not with the korban. The korban itself is fit. It's something else that happened. The owners got Tamay, and everyone would agree that it requires Ibor Surah. But the machlokas is before the Zrika Sadam, if they became Tamay, so the meat was never actually fit to be eaten. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka would say that's considered Psula B'Gufo, and you would burn it. And Tanna Kama says that it would require Ibor Tzurus. Now going back to what we said in Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, that if the person shechted the korban pesach and then found out that the people were tamei, so it require so you would burn it immediately. I guess that would be like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Yeah, or maybe even if you found out that they became tamei before the shchita, maybe then everybody would agree. Maybe because I was talking about shchita, but the point is that we do see that it's not memela that just because it has to do with the owners that it's going to be ibur tzura. Even with the owners, it could require burning. Unless you could say it's taka machlokas as well. I don't know. Interesting. So I just looked at Tosfos taka. The Tosfos, which I mentioned actually, when we were learning Ayin Gimel Beis, I mentioned that there was a Tosfos. I didn't really learn it. But I just looked at it now, and yeah, Itaka says what I just said, which is that you could say that over there it's talking about where the korban taka, the owners became tamei even before the shchita happened. So it was like mamish psula begufo, and therefore you'll just burn it immediately. Fine. It would be like you shechted it shelo le'ochlav, and it will be burned immediately. Okay, so that was daf Pei Beis of Masechta Pesachim. Yeah, interesting daf. It's funny, these dafs have been like kind of complex, even if they don't feel like they're going to be complex, they kind of are. Anyway, so burning Tamay Korban Pesach, right? So we had talked about if the entire Korban Pesach or the majority of it becomes Tamay, then you burn it like in the Beis Hamikdash, where you burn Psulei Kodshim. Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina said that the reason is so that will embarrass you, because you want to embarrass you for being irresponsible, so irresponsible that the entire Korban or most of it became Tamay. Then when it comes to a smaller amount of the Korban Pesach or Noser, so you could just burn it at your house. So now, however, we had a brisa which says that if you're leaving Jerusalem and you remember that you have Kodshim, you go and dafka burn it by the Beis Hamikdash. So is it in your house or is it in the Beis Hamikdash? So we had two different opinions. We had the opinion of Rav Chaim Bar Ukva and of Rav Zvid, which is that, well, it depends. If you're a homeowner, so then burn it in your house. If you're a guest, burn it by the Beis Hamikdash. Rav Papa says that no, both are talking about guests, and it depends. If you haven't left yet, so then burn it at the place where you're staying. If you've already left, so then just go back to the Beis Hamikdash and burn it there. We had this interesting machlokas between, or distinction, or way of thinking between Rav Yosef and Rava. What happens? Can you bring your own wood to the Beis Hamikdash to burn the Psulei Kodshim? The answer seems to be no. The question is why. Rav Yosef is concerned about people being embarrassed. That, well, if you have some people bring their own wood and some people using what's there, they might be embarrassed for not bringing their own. Rava says that the issue is, well, you might have yentis dartin who are going to think that maybe you're stealing some of the atzei ma'aracha when you take it back with you. So the nafkamina would be, what if you took wood that clearly isn't usable for the atzei ma'aracha? Then we had another, along the same lines, we brought up another case, which is that the Kohanim that are supposed to be working in the Beis HaMikdash that are Tamay, they have to stand by the entrance to the Beis HaMikdash. The question is why. Rav Yosef says to embarrass them for not being careful and to letting down their guard and becoming Tamay. Rava says it's because of the Yentas, that if they don't see them, hey, why didn't he show up to do the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash? Maybe he's got more important things to do. The nafkamina over there would be people who clearly don't have more important things to do, so you can assume that they're in the Beis HaMikdash, and it must just be that they became Tamay. We move on to the next Mishnah, which talked about burning the korban pesach if it's yotzei or if it becomes Tamay. And then when it came to the owners, if the owners became Tamay, or if the if the owners became Tamay or they died. So then we had a machlokas between the Tanakama, who says that it requires ibertzura, and according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says that you can burn it immediately. And then the maskana of the Gemara was that this machlokas is dafka before Zrika Sadam. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says that it's psula begufo and you're going to burn it immediately, whereas the Chacham say no, that the Tanakama says no, it's bebailim, it's sort of meta, and therefore would require ibertzura. But after Zrika Sadam, everyone would agree that it requires ibertzura before burning it. Along the way, we also learned how do we know that all of psulei kachim you burn? That is halachah Moshe Sinai. Friends, have a great day. Peace out.